Hi there, Trailblazer owners. Today on your 2021 Chevrolet Trailblazer, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Roadmaster's Direct Connect baseplate. And this is what our baseplate looks like when it's installed. You can see that the attachments are going to pass through the bottom here of our fascia, and this is a nice baseplate because it's given us places to mount our breakaway switch and our diode wiring. So you've just got everything you need right up here at front for you. It's a nice clean look. The black powder coat finish blends in with the exterior of the vehicle really well, and it really just all looks like it was kind of meant to be there. On our base plate, you're going to have an attachment for your tow bar on each side. This is going to allow us to insert the component that our base plate will attach to there. Towards the center, we've got our safety cable attachment point, and then of course we got those mounting locations for our electrical components. We've got the same attachments on the opposite side there for our tow bar. This currently is in the mode that you would have it in when you're just driving around town. We can minimize the distance any components stick out the front. It's really nice too if you have this parked in your garage. You don't really want to have your flat toe connections in there because if you're walking by, you could potentially hit your leg on it, and then you got a sore shin. These are our attachments right here, so you can see that they are removable. We can take our attachments, and if we take them and push it in, give it a spin counterclockwise or clockwise, whichever way, until the pin locks into place there. We'll do the same thing over here on the other side. And at this point, our tow bar could connect directly to our attachments. With this being a Roadmaster base plate, any Roadmaster tow bar will connect directly to this. But we've also got adapters available here at eTrailer, so if you've got another manufacturer's tow bar, you can get those ends swapped over so you can connect to this base plate. We can then lower these arms down, lining up the ends of our tow bar with the holes in the attachments on our base plate. We'll take the pins and we're going to go from the outside in through the attachment arm there, and then we'll take the clip and slide it down on the other side to lock it in place. We'll just repeat that procedure over here on this side to get this one attached. And at this point, we're ready to hook up the rest of our flat toe connections, which typically includes your diode wiring, your safety cables, and we want to make sure we are crossing these. So I've got the driver's side on the motorhome connecting to the passenger side on our vehicle, and vice versa for the other one. What that's going to do is create a cradle here at the front, so in the event of a catastrophic disconnect, it'll keep our components up off the pavement so they don't dig down into there. And lastly, you want to hook up your breakaway switch so you have your supplemental braking system fully operational. At this point, we're ready to place our vehicle into flat tow mode, and we're ready to hit the road. Now that you've got your tow bar installed, when you go to hook up to your motorhome, one of the most important things is having a nice level tow bar when you connect. So oftentimes your vehicle is going to sit lower than your motorhome, but there are occasions where it could be the other way around. In any case, you can use a high-low adapter to give you a nice level tow bar. With the Direct Connect base plate, our measurement from the ground to the center of our attachment point on our tow bar is going to be 14.5 inches. What you'll want to do then is you'll want to measure on your motorhome here from the ground to the center of your hitch, and we'll get a measurement there, and we're at about 22.5 inches here. So you can see we're about 8 inches higher. We're about 8 inches higher on our motorhome than when we are on our vehicle. So we want to make sure that we level that back out. And with this high-low adapter here, which is an 8-inch drop high-low adapter, that's going to put us with a nice flat level tow bar. We'll begin our installation here at the front of the vehicle with our hood open. We're going to need to remove some fasteners across the top of the vehicle here. There are several fasteners and some rubber bump stops. We'll start by removing the bump stops. To remove these, just grab them and give a little bit of upward pressure, and then just turn counterclockwise, and they'll unthread right out of there. So we'll remove the remaining 3 just like that. Once those are removed, here's our fasteners that we now need to take out. They're Torx head bits, and there are going to be 7 of them. You'll have 3 on the passenger side and 4 on the driver's side. So we'll just take our T15 bit, we'll slide it down into those screws, and we'll just zip those out of there. We're now on the driver's side wheel well. I went ahead and turned the passenger wheel all the way to the right, and that kind of gets it out of the way so we can easily get these fasteners out in here. There are 4 more screws here along the inside edge going down to the bottom. We'll use the same size bit to remove those. Once we get these 4 removed, there's also a pin located up at the top. If we then follow upwards, so it's pretty much just straight up and then go inward, we'll find our push pin fastener up in there. We'll use our trim panel tool to get behind the head and just pop it out of there. What happened there, it came out pretty fast, but once you get the head popped out, that releases it, and then you can just pull it right out of there. Now that we've got those removed on this side, we'll be doing the same thing on the other side. When removing the ones on the other side, it's probably going to help to take you and turn your wheel the other way to give you the clearance over here as well. So now we're underneath the vehicle. We've got some fasteners we're going to be removing in the middle and on each side. We're going to start with our Torx bit that we had on the side, and there's going to be several Torx screws that you see over here. There's about 5 of them over here. We only need to remove the ones that actually are connecting to our fender liner there, which is going to be this one here and this one here. And you can actually see like where the fender liner kind of would get attached by those. So we'll get both of those out of there with that same T15 Torx. And then once we get these 2 out on this side, we'll be removing the exact same 2 on the other side. We'll now take out the fasteners across the center where our undershield's attached to here. So there are a total of 6, 3 on each side, and we're going to use a 7mm socket to remove those. Now after this first one here on the outside, you'll see that there's an opening hole here. You may or may not have a push pin fastener there. Our customer doesn't have one there, but I do suspect that there's likely supposed to be one there. Same when you get to the other side. There's likely a push pin fastener right there between these 2 outer screws, but the one on this vehicle is not there. We're now going to come back to our fender here because we needed to get some of those loose on bottom. We're going to pull our fender liner back some, and I'm just using a trim panel tool to kind of pry this out of here. And we'll need to pull this trim piece off here. It's hard to see, but around the inside, if we kind of just feel in there, there are little white clips. We're looking for those white clips, and I'm just giving them a little bit of a pinch. And then we'll take our trim panel tool here on the outside. And you can actually see, if you look at the paneling here, how when I'm pushing on that clip, it makes a little gap right there. And I'm squeezing the clip just a little bit, and that's going to let it pop right on out of there. Here you can see the white clips that we were talking about that we passed out. You can see where I was squeezing to get it to pass through, and we're just going to follow that up. You can see here I'm kind of giving it some pressure and it's not coming out, but with my other hand I give it a little bit of a pinch and it just pops right out of there. Now there is some along the way, so as we're going up, just kind of pay attention. You can kind of see there's one right here as well. So just feel from the back side for each of those clips and squeeze them as you take them out. Just like that. And we're gonna get those released all the way back to where behind this point here. Once we've got it released to this point here, it changes to a different style of clip. So we're just gonna use our trim panel tool with a little bit of pressure to get it released a little bit further. You could also use plastic ones depending on the area there. And we can always pull that fender liner down to give assistance with these as well. We just need to get a little bit further back. That should be good there, because we needed to reveal this bolt right here. We're going to remove this using a ratchet and a 7mm socket. Once we get that loose, most of the time they'll come out of there by hand afterwards. Or what I like to do is you can take the socket off of your ratchet after you break it loose, and that makes a good little thumb wheel to get that out by hand. So once we get this guy out of here, what I'll do next is take some rags, and I like to kind of fold them up to make a spacer. And we can use that spacer then to hold this trim piece out. So that way when we're removing our fascia, we don't have to worry about bumping into it. It kind of gives us a clearance that we need. So I'm just taking the rag here, just folding it up until it gets pretty thick. And then we can just peel back on this, and we're just gonna slide it in just like that. And you can see the gap that it's made here for us, so that way we can easily get our fascia removed. We're gonna go ahead and just put another one in towards the top as well. After we get these in place, we'll head over to the passenger side, and we'll perform the exact same procedures over there to get that side removed as well. We can now start to get our fascia peeled off. We're gonna start on one side. I'm just kind of pulling back on the fender liner so I can get a grip behind the fascia. And then I'm just gonna kind of pull outward, just like that, until we get it popped out towards the center of our taillight here. Once we get it popped out to that point where it's released from the taillight, we're gonna stop on this side, and we're gonna go over to the passenger side there, and we're gonna get it released to that point as well. So now that we get these released, we can pull out on it a little bit. These little black pegs that you see here and here, what that actually is that is the push pin for the wiring harness that's on the inside, and we need to get that taken off of there. So we're gonna take our trim panel tool, we're gonna go behind this piece here to get behind our wiring harness, and we're just gonna pop it out of there. You can see here's that wiring harness that we just popped out with the trim pull. I just got the tool kind of behind it like this and just popped it out. So we're gonna get the next one released here, and then make sure we get the ones over on the other side released as well. Now I do recommend grabbing an extra set of hands because of all the electrical wiring and stuff. We are gonna have some connectors back there, and this one is a little bit too difficult to do with one person. We're now gonna rock out the center, and then we can kind of pull up on the top here to release it from the little tabs. And then we'll slowly walk it away and check for any electrical connectors. Looks like over on our passenger side, we're gonna have one over here. We can remove this connector by pulling out on the lock tab here. So it's a little red tab. And then we can press the release right there. And it can be pretty stiff. Sometimes if you actually push it together and then try to release it, it makes it a little bit easier. We'll then set this aside where it won't get damaged. We'll need to remove our air dam. We'll use a pair of snips to make diagonal cuts here at the corners to separate it from the upper section. The upper section is going to stay on the vehicle. Once we've made those cuts, we can now release the tabs holding the air dam on. These tabs are located on the bottom. You'll pull the air dam directly towards you while pushing up on these tabs with a screwdriver to release them. Once we get the one side released over here, we'll then go over to the other side and release the other side the same way. We can then set this aside, and we're not going to reinstall it. We now need to make a small modification to the intercooler here at the bottom to have clearance for our base plate. On the passenger side, you'll notice that there is a small tab here that sticks out. We need to trim this off so that way it's not in the way. We're just going to use a cutoff wheel to trim this somewhat flush when removing it. So remove it here. And then after you've got it trimmed, if you want, you can take a file in here to just clean up these rough edges. It does kind of melt a little bit. And we're just trying to smooth it out and knock off any of that melted part, really. Next, we're going to remove the bolts from our bumper beam here. You'll have 4 on each side. The upper outer bolt we're going to leave in place. The other 3 on each side we'll be removing. We'll use a 15mm socket to remove these. Next in your kit, we're going to have our spacers and put those in place, but I wanted to point out the 2 different spacers. If you look, they are very close to the same size, but one is slightly shorter than the other. You'll have 2 of these shorter ones, and you'll have 4 of these longer ones. We're going to use the longer ones in these holes here. So we'll take 4 of them and set those in place inside those holes so that way they're ready for us. We're getting about ready to lift our base plate into position and start attaching it, but I find it easier if you prepare your hardware first. We're going to attach it with the longer bolts that come in our kit. Each of these is going to get a lock washer, followed by a flat washer, and then all the hardware that attaches our base plate to the vehicle we're going to be using red Loctite on. We'll have a total of 3 of these for each side, so I'm going to go ahead and get these 6 prepared, and I suggest you do as well. We can now set our base plate into position. If you need so, you can grab yourself an extra set of hands. You want to carefully make sure we go around our intercooler, and then we're going to line up our holes in our base plate with those spacers, and then get a bolt started on each side. Got one started there. We'll then head over to this side and get one started over here. When starting your bolts on the base plate, you may need to stick a small pry bar in this outer hole here like we are. And we're using it to pry it over just so we can get everything lined up, because it was very close on the way everything lined up on it. Now we've got one of these started on each side. It will hold itself up, making it easier to install the rest of the hardware. We can go ahead and get those inner ones installed in there. And once you get those started, we're going to go back to those shorter spacers that we had mentioned earlier, and these are going to drop in from the side. With our hardware still loose, you can kind of pull out to get that to slide in there. And then we're going to use the same hardware, just with that different spacer, and get into those outer holes. We'll now take the smallest diameter hardware that comes in the kit, and we're going to prepare it with lock washers and flat washers like the other hardware, and of course some Loctite. You'll have 2 for each side. And then we're going to take our lower brackets here, and these are side specific. So we got the driver's side one here. The longer section here is going to be horizontal, and the holes are going to match up with those factory weld nuts. The other 2 vertical holes here, where it goes up, should line up with your base plate, and you can see the little gusset there and the open holes right there. So we want these to line up with our factory weld nuts there, and then we're going to take that hardware we prepared and just thread it right into it. Once we get these threaded in over here, we can get the other side kind of mocked up the same way. We can now take the slightly larger diameter, and they're also slightly shorter than the previous ones we used. And these ones we're going to get just a flat washer. We're going to go from the outside in. On the other side, we'll follow it up with a flat washer, a lock washer, and a nut. So we'll just repeat that for the other hole on this side, and then the 2 holes over on the other side. We can now go back and tighten our hardware down. We're going to start with the bolts here where it attaches to our bumper beam. We're going to use a 17mm socket on these. Then we can use a 13mm socket for the side bolts that go into the factory weld nuts. And lastly, we'll use a 15mm socket and a wrench to tighten down the bracket to the base plate. You'll need your socket on the outside and your wrench in here on the inside. And here you can get a good look of why we needed to trim off that piece so we can clear for our bolt there. We can now go back and torque all of our hardware to the specifications outlined in our instructions. We'll do it in the order that we had tightened them down. So now that we've got our base plate fully torqued down, the base plate installation is basically complete. At this point, we would be reinstalling our fascia in reverse order. We are going to have to make a few modifications to that fascia in order for it to clear our base plate here. But I highly recommend at this point you hold off on reinstalling that fascia and complete the rest of your flat toe setup, which is usually going to include your diode wiring and your supplemental braking system. A lot of those components, you'll have to route wires up here to the front of the vehicle, and while we've got that fascia off, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. We can see here right at the front of our base plate, they've offered wiring mounting locations as well as breakaway switch mounting locations for your braking system. So we can get all of our wires routed up to this point. I'm going to go ahead and do that now and complete the rest of those components installation, and then once I get those in place, I'll come back and meet up with you and we'll show you how to get that fascia reinstalled. Before we reinstall our fascia, we do need to make some modifications here to the inside of it. The foam dampener here on the inside, we're going to completely remove. You can see there's kind of clips here, 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 and here, 4 of those. Those are just plastic clips. You just simply push them away, and you can kind of just rock this out of there. We'll do that on this side as well. Take this whole piece off, and we're just going to set this aside. We're not going to be reinstalling it so we can have clearance for our base plate. We also need to make modifications to the ribbed area here towards the bottom of our fascia. On each side, we'll need to trim out this middle rib towards the outside here. That's going to allow for clearance for our base plate to pass through. We're just going to use a pair of snips to trim these right off of here. The directions also want you to trim out this piece here next to this sensor, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually leave this in place. I'm pretty sure that the fascia is going to be able to slide back on with this rib in place if you haven't installed your diode wiring connector. That way we can trim it out with the smallest amount as possible, so that way when we put our connector together, it'll hide any trimming that we've made there. So at this point, we're now ready to just grab our fascia and reinstall it in reverse order of how we removed it. Now with an extra set of hands, we can reinstall our fascia. Don't forget to plug in your electrical connector over here on the passenger side. Slide those guys back together, and then make sure you reinsert that lock tab. And then we'll lift our fascia into position. If we can get the top hooked on first, that'll make things a little bit easier, but we do also need to look down below and make sure that our components are passing through properly. Sometimes we have to angle it in a certain way in order to get everything to pass through. We can see here we're catching on our electrical components, or it was the safety chain attachment there, so we just move it around till we're able to get it past that. It does look like here where our breakaway switch is, you'll have to just kind of push up on that breakaway switch just a little bit to get it to clear as well. Now that we've got our fascia reinstalled, if you're installing a 6-pole connector at the front here, this is the part we talked about where we were going to trim, but we wanted to wait till we got it on the car, because you can see here where our connector would go, the back of it's going to hit there, and we can see the width of our switch there. So we're just going to come in right on the side of the switch. We're going to give a little trim there, and then we're just going to come on this side of the switch and give a little trim here, and then this way we know that our switch is going to be able to go in place, and we're going to have the smallest trim possible so we can maintain that factory look. You might also notice after trimming that, when you hold this up here, that the connector's hitting on the fascia here after we've got it reinstalled, and it's really not going to line up with that bracket. That's no big deal. Due to manufacturer variances, it may be slightly off. We can easily correct that. We're going to use an extension with an 11mm socket on it. That's actually going to slide right over these really easily, which gives us a ton of leverage to just put a little pressure on that and just bend it down a little bit. We're going to do the same thing on this one. Bend it down about the same distance. Just kind of double check, see where you're at there. And then we can hold it up there once again. It looks like we're still going to have a little bit of contact, so we'll bend it just a little bit more until we're completely clear. And it looks like we'll have plenty of clearance there, and we also want to just make sure we can flip it open. Looks like our lid will be able to open and everything there. So now you've got that all adjusted. If you are hooking up your 6-pole connector, you can go ahead and finish getting that installed and mount it up. You'll mount this up just using the 2 self-tapping screws that come provided with your kit and an 8mm socket. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's Direct Connect baseplate on our 2021 Chevrolet Trailblazer.